All right, we have State Senator, Colorado State Senator Cooke joining us here. John Cooke, former sheriff of Weld County District. Oh boy,
13.
13. Okay, thank you.
Lucky 13.
Lucky 13. Well, my name is Jason, so for me, 13 is lucky.
There you go.
So, all right, let's start off with a little bit about Colorado update here. We had a very interesting 2021 from the COVID side of things, but the regulations seem to really kind of wait till the end of the year before a lot of changes came in. But there have been some changes in 2020 with oil and gas regulations, haven't there?
Yeah, yes, quite a few. And I'm going to get a little political here. The governor wouldn't know the truth if it hit him in the face, because he talked about hey, the war on oil and gas is over, it's time to move on, and promote business, and then he turns around and like 2 days after he says that the war on oil and gas is over, he turns around and the Oil and Gas Commission, COGCC, that he appoints, with no Republicans on there, mind you, all Democrats or independents that lean left, and all far left environmentalists, turn around 2 days later and propose a 2,000-foot setback from basically any dwelling, any house, any dwelling, and they could give some variances, and there's a lot of restrictions going on. Not only on the setbacks, but on air quality control and wildlife restrictions. So it's going to be a tough year for oil and gas in Colorado.
Let me jump in for just a second here, because when I was down in Colorado a few months ago, like I want to say October, maybe September, I talked to a number of state officials, and they basically said that, well, there's kind of a truce going on, and the governor and the oil and gas industry and the government officials, they're working together till after the election's done. Then they're going to meet once again, and that's at least the impression was that there was going to be some sort of meeting collaboration to see if there can be some sort of agreement moving forward. What you just said made me think of that. Was that the case? Was there this kind of this truce? And then, because to me, it seems like the governor just did exactly what he did when he got elected.
Right. Yeah, no, there were meetings, but there was no collaboration. It was the government, or COGCC, telling oil and gas how it's going to be. Oil and gas would come in with evidence and scientific evidence, and then they would hear from environmentalists who, make up stuff that that's pulls on people's emotions, and they didn't listen to what oil and gas had to say, and the commission, like I said, one of the commissioners said, "Look, if I could do a mile setback, I would do it." And so the commission is really anti-oil and gas, and like I said, the governor tried to give that impression by saying, "Oh, the war is over, and we're going to work together." But then the commission, literally 2 days later, came out with 2,000-foot setbacks, and which is going to be very difficult for oil and gas to abide by. It's going to be, even here in Weld County. And so, there was, like I said, no collaboration. And, and then the staffers, I don't know if you heard about this, the staffers of the COGCC were testing a new email system or computer system, and they accidentally sent emails to the oil and gas companies, and it was supposed to be an internal email, but they called oil and gas companies. Basically, one company was identified as 666. The other one was identified as that Dr. Seuss character, can't think of what it is right now.
Grinch?
No, not the Grinch. It's not Lazor. It's Larynx or something like that.
Oh, Lorax.
Lorax, yeah. It was called one company, the Lorax.
So snake oil was another one.
Yeah, snake oil, and so they called all these companies, those names, and so that just gives you the idea of how much the COGCC is anti-industry in the
Well,
state.
and that's a very important part. In fact, we had I'm trying to remember who we had on. We had on somebody from the state, and I asked the question because I think it is a real question. At what point does this become discrimination? Because this is not only rank prejudice, but now there's actually examples and a body of work that's being done here. This is not finger pointing or even political, but when you can start citing multiple examples about things that are getting to the point to where you can say that's rank prejudice, that's discrimination. When does the state step in? Is there an ethics commission? Is there any sort of recourse on something like this, or is it, hey, bend over and take it, buddy?
Yeah, basically it's bend over and take it. There is an ethics commission, but it doesn't have anything to do with government regulations. It more has to do with political violations. But the only recourse really is the courts, and because some of these regulations, in my opinion, are takings, and it's a violation of our state constitution to have the state do a taking without compensation. And so these mineral right owners who are not now going to be able to develop their minerals the government had a taking from them, and so they're going to be out money. So I think what we're going to see is a series of lawsuits against some of these regulations based on, like you said, the discrimination, but also on the takings that the government is doing to not only the oil and gas companies, but the individual landowners who depend on these minerals. I was talking to a dairy farmer. It was about a year or so ago when 112 was up on the ballot. And he said, if that passes, I'm going to have to fold my dairy farm. I can't make it on just dairying. I depend on oil and gas mineral rights and the future mineral rights that I have under the ground to survive. So I think that's where we're going to see the direction that the state is headed when it comes to these regulations.
I always heard a rumor, and I thought I checked it one time, that the governor, Jared Polis, before he was elected, he had written a book called The Colorado Blueprint. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. Yes.
What, do you have a short version of just kind of the history behind that?
Yeah, it wasn't just him. There were 4 of them, and basically it's the Democrat big donors, and they came up with what they called the blueprint on how to take Colorado back, and they poured millions and millions of dollars into getting Democrats elected and redistricting. So they got control of one of the chambers. They redistrict. Well, the Republicans had one chamber, the Democrats had the other, and the Democrats knew that if they didn't cooperate and if they stuck to their guns on the redistricting, it would go to a Denver district court who was appointed by Democrat governors and a Democrat judge, and that they would win. And so that the judge sided with the Democrats for the last 2 times we redistricted. But that was part of their plan, was to put Democrats in the chambers, and it worked because now we have a Democrat Senate and a Democrat House and a Democrat governor, and we have very little power to stop them. So that was part of the blueprint, was to pour money into Democrat candidates, get them elected, and then take over the state, pretty much what they've done.
You look at states like North Dakota, New Mexico came out with some recent numbers. North Dakota, anywhere from 50 to 60% of the general budget's tied to the 2 oil and gas taxes. And then in New Mexico, like I said, a bunch of the tax dollars came out as how much reliant they are as well. I'm not sure about Colorado. I know Wyoming is pretty heavy into energy, but they've got a lot of coal and natural gas and to go with their oil and gas, or go with their oil exploration. But where's the disconnect? Because it seems that there's a lot of public officials who do not understand where the taxes come from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well.
Sorry, that was a long pause there. I didn't sure if I'd asked the right question.
Right. Yeah. No, I know what you're saying, but no, it doesn't make sense because so much tax revenue is generated by oil and gas in this state. $200 million to K-12 comes from oil and gas, and the severance taxes, and the general budget, not just tax money, but when you have 144,000 employees in the state that work for oil and gas, they're paying income tax, they're doing sales tax, they're going to restaurants, so the state's getting money from there. 44% of downtown Denver, the office space is oil and gas related. And so they're getting money from the oil and gas industry through their leases of the buildings, through the employees down there who visit the restaurants. And so it's hundreds of millions of dollars that goes into the state budget every year from oil and gas. But you're right. There's legislators who either don't know or just don't care because they have another agenda. Their agenda is, placating the Sierra Club and the far left radical environmentalists. So they just don't care. And they just think, well, you know what? If we don't have oil and gas, we'll just develop wind and solar, and that'll, cure all of our problems.
What I don't get is, that mentality, and it is a mentality. And listen, it's here at the Crude Life, we say it's almost easier to talk to a brick wall than it is to someone. Well, it's true though. Listen, I've got a 14-year-old, and I raised him, so I was a father, and I know what it's like to talk to children, and it's very similar right now. It's very similar, and I'm going to transition to the North Face. I'm sure you followed that a little bit as far as the rejecting business from oil gas companies on the grounds that they do not do business with companies that do tobacco, pornography, and oil and gas. And that was the first time I've seen now publicly that oil and gas has got lumped in with tobacco, and I've never seen pornography before. That was a new one, but okay. And by the way, your car does not run on Joe Camels, and your house is not powered by Marlboros. So there's a big difference between tobacco and oil and gas. Yeah, there's a smokestack, but go take a look, and it's totally different smoke. A lot of that white stuff is steam, by the way, people.
Absolutely.
It's steam. Okay. But my question is that the North Face and is it VF Corporation, I believe, is the parent company. They're out of Denver. And they have that same kind of bull mentality, blue bull mentality, the blue boulder rolling down the hill, and they just purchased some land outside of Denver for their private jets to come in, but they've got a whole line of FR clothing. So you've got fire-resistant clothing that not only is made out of the oil and gas products, but your number one client is the oil and gas industry. So from a shareholder corporate governance standpoint, from just a sheer who rejects business during a pandemic when everybody's begging for business, it just seems like there is a bigger agenda here that's really well funded at the corporate governor type of level. Now, those are just two examples that I brought in, but it just seems different, It just seems like there is like a boulder rolling down the hill.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's part of the problem is that Denver Boulder controls this state, and it's the legislature and at the governor's mansion, and they have this anti-business attitude, and again, they have an anti-oil and gas attitude and feeling, and they don't want to do business. They want to divest from any retirement fund that has oil and gas in their portfolio. So they have a very much anti-oil and gas, anti-business attitude, not just towards oil and gas. You mentioned cigarettes or tobacco. I don't smoke, but you know what? I don't care if people do. That's their choice. But they want to control people, and they do it through this type of legislation or this type of business practices.
What should Weld County do? Maybe over on the Grand Junction side where they've got a little bit more natural gas. I suppose down in the southern part, I don't know how much is going down in Trinidad or down in the Pueblo area, but there's oil and gas all the way across the state now that I'm thinking out loud here. If there's somebody who's maybe friends work in the oil and gas industry, or maybe they work in the oil and gas industry and they want to get active finally, or they want to have their voice heard, outside of just posting on a social media post? What do you recommend to people? I mean, do they email you or your staff or the governor, the commission, or what?
Yeah, what I've been telling people for the oil and gas industry for the last several years. 2 years ago, there was a ballot initiative 112 that had like 2,500-foot setbacks, and from anything, just about any irrigation ditch, any building, and there was a concerted effort, and I went to defeat that. And for the first time, I saw oil and gas really getting into the grassroots, and I went to just about every oil and gas business in my district, and there are a lot, and even some outside. I said, look, you need to come down and testify, not the head of COGA or the head of API, but you need to have people, the line worker, come down and testify in the Senate and House committee meetings and say, hey, how much oil and gas affects their lives in a positive way. Because you get the anti-oil and gas people, and they come down and talk, oh, oil and gas is killing my children or my child, and it's destroying our neighborhood and it's polluting. No, we need the line workers to come and say, look, I work in the oil and gas industry, and it's putting my kids through college, or it's paying our healthcare bills. My neighbors, kids play with my kids, and if we shut down oil and gas, I have to move. And the same thing, I went to them and said, look, you need to start talking to your neighbors over this ballot initiative. Go to them and say, do you like us being your neighbors? Do you like your kids playing with my kids? Then vote no on this initiative. And and start telling how oil and gas affects you in a positive way. And I think it worked because it passed. I mean, the initiative failed overwhelmingly in the state. There was only like 8 counties that supported it, and it was like Boulder and a couple of the mountain communities. So I think it worked, and that's what we need to have. They need to be active politically, and I'm not talking just like I said, the CEOs. I'm talking the line workers, the the middle management, upper management. Everybody needs to get involved.
How about from the state side? Are we at the non-elected accountability yet pressure, where the people who maybe are appointed, and somebody works for the education department, or people saying, hey, how come you're not sticking up for the oil and gas industry because they're funding about 90% of your industry? Things like that. You know what I mean? Just kind of the little bit more I don't know, backhanded ways to get some pressure put in some different areas, that because if they're elected, they're elected. That's
Right.
That's the way it is. But if you're appointed, or you applied for a job, you're not supposed to be political at all. You're supposed to really represent the people, type of a thing. So there's ways to apply pressure there. That's all I'm wondering, if we're getting to that point yet.
No, not at all. Because you got to realize the people that are appointed by a Democrat governor, and even if we confirm them, doesn't matter. We can, because we're in the minority, so they can be anti oil and gas on the COGCC, and they still get appointed because the Republicans are in the minority right now, and so that's not really going to work. And people are so so separated from the bureaucrats, they have no idea what's happening, what they're doing to them for the most part. And
what worries me in today's day and age is that the example we were just talking about some of that, just applied pressure, and that blowback is real now. The blowback that can come, it's well funded. It's got some force behind it. So
yes, it does.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's more important that people that are in the oil and gas, like I said, work through their political means. Here in Greeley, there was a Democrat in House District 50, and Rochelle Galendo, and she got recalled because she voted for Senate Bill 181. She was in the House, but when it made it over there, she voted for it, which was the anti-oil and gas bill that eventually passed. But here's a representative from Greeley that is highly dependent on, Weld County is highly dependent on oil and gas, that voted for an anti-oil and gas bill, and she got recalled because of it. So there is political pressure that can be put on, and I think it comes through the ballot box.
Well, I mean, there's certainly some classy ways of doing it, and it's always best to take the high road when you can. But just a few, through our conversation, I've heard of a few ways that the high road was not taken in order to really do some damage to the oil and gas industry. And I'm not one to, I'm not an eye for an eye guy, but also I don't like getting picked on too long either. So I do eventually fight back. So
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. I wish, for a lot of times, unfortunately, oil and gas has placated these people.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, really, at the end of the day, oil and gas is, the big bad wolf, no matter what they do, because 96% of our life is dependent on it, and so they're in a lose-lose position a lot of times, they really are. And
and I understand, but yet sometimes you just got to stand up and fight with everything you got. Instead, like you said, the oil and gas industry, I mean, some of them, the industry companies gave more money to Democrats than they did to the Republicans for the election.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and then those very Democrats that received that money, as soon as they got in, turned around and attacked oil and gas. And oil and gas tries to placate them and go along with them. And at some point, you just got to, say, hey, enough is enough. We're either shutting down our operations or, we're going to fight back with everything we got. We're going to take you to court every chance we get. And we're going to fight. And we've had enough. But, draw that line in the sand, and they haven't done it yet.
Well, any final thoughts here? Appreciate the time and the access as we talk with Senator John Cooke from District 13. Greeley, Colorado is is that the big kind of hub there for your district?
Yeah. Greeley is about 110,000 population right now, and so most of my district is in Greeley, although it runs all the way down to the county line, about 40 miles to the south. So yeah, as a matter of fact, Greeley just overtook Boulder in population this year.
Oh, you're kidding me?
No. Boulder's losing population, and Greeley's getting it. Is picking it up.
Boulder's losing population, but yet their ozone emission, it continues to rise?
Yep. Yes. Yeah, go figure.
I mean, that's a true statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I saw that they were number one in the state for pollution.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's interesting. So, are you not Fort Collins, are you?
No, that's
Okay.
in Larimer County.
Okay,
My district is solely in Weld. There's 3 senators that represent Weld, and mine is exclusively in Weld County.
I just know they're pretty close, and
yes,
and
unfortunately,
geographically, but they're certainly very different ideologically. That's
absolutely
very.
Fort Collins is trying to out Boulder when it comes to going left, and so yes, very different ideologically.
Well, that's what I thought. I used to stay in Fort Collins quite a bit, and I would bring this example up a lot 5-6 years ago, that when I would stay in the breakfast bar, I enjoy talking to strangers in breakfast bars of hotels, especially when I'm out of town. And, a lot of times you can, get some great conversations going because a lot of people are in the same boat you're in. And what I noticed was people started looking over their shoulders before they mentioned that they were in oil and gas 5-6 years ago. And that was interesting to me because that wasn't happening really anywhere else. And so I was like, oh, this is I made a mental note of it and everything. And then now we're at where we're at today and everything along those lines. And how long is the governor there for? Is he there for another 2 years?
Yeah, let's see. He's only in his second year, so he's got 2 years and then another election if he wins.
Right.
So he's 6 years, yeah.
Okay, so assume 2.
Let's hope.
Well, I would think so. I mean, this is, I would assume anybody that polarizing wouldn't do well, but that's just, who knows. But
when you can spend $30 million of your own money to become governor, it's not hard to win an election.
Oh, he's self-funded like that.
Yep. Yeah. He spent $30 million. And what's so funny about it, not funny, it's sad. Several years ago, he wrote and funded political reform here in campaign reform. And he pretty much wrote it. And if you self-fund, there's no limits on how much you can spend.
Right.
If you don't self-fund, there's a limit on how much you can receive. I think it's like for governor, it might be $1,200. I can't remember exactly. So if our candidate had a good quarter, like say raised 200,000 in one quarter, he'd write himself a check for $2 million.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so he spent about $30 million of his own to get elected governor, and our candidate was only able to raise about $3 million.
In a state that's known historically for being blue, is that right?
Well, not historically. As a
I
matter
mean,
of fact,
somewhere in the 90s it changed, right? Or whatever it
yeah,
was.
So, 90s, yeah.
Early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. But, we did have the Senate for 4 years when I first got elected in 15. And then we lost the Senate 2 years ago, and we only lost one seat this year. Democrats thought we'd lose 3 to 5, but we only lost one. So we're holding our own.
Well, one last question, and just because you're in Colorado, you might I would imagine at least the conversations would be happening in the cafes and things like that. But has anybody from the environmental wing, whether it's the Office of the Environment or the Bureau of Land Management or whoever, discussed what the plan is for some of these parks and some of these environmental projects that they have going if they try to get rid of oil and gas? Because my understanding is that the oil and gas industry funds a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely they do. No, they have not. Like I said, they either don't know or don't care. And so, no, they don't have stakeholder meetings. Now the government bureaucracies have it, like the COGCC or the Air Quality Control. They have to have public meetings, but these environmental groups, no, they don't sit down and talk with oil and gas and or state legislators to find out, what would happen if oil and gas, picks up and leaves, or if they get regulated out of business here, which is unfortunate.
Well, appreciate you keeping up the good fight. Former sheriff, so you know how to follow the law and make the law. So
right. I'd rather enforce it, to be honest with you, at this point.
Well, and that's what's got to be frustrating, honestly, from your perspective, is that, you are a lawman at the end of the day. And,
right.
So now you're in the part where you're helping formulate and shape and manipulate and maneuver and that sort of thing when, all the above when it comes to the law. But, you're, like I said, you are a lawman. So it's got to be frustrating at times for you to see this stuff.
Very much so, especially not only on the oil and gas side, but also on the law enforcement side, because I'm the only one down there that has a law enforcement background. And it's funny how, everybody down there at the legislature thinks they know how to, run law enforcement better than the professionals. So that's really frustrating when you see these anti-law enforcement bills that get introduced down there at the Capitol.
Yeah, don't get me started on those. Anyway, but well, I appreciate the time today. We'll talk down the line. Okay, sir?
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.